Okay, let's get started. My name is Gene Karpinski. I'm the president of the League of Conservation Voters. LCV is a national environmental group that works to turn environmental priorities into national values. We work closely with our state league partners across the country. Today we're releasing our annual Congressional Scorecard, which covers the first session of 112th Congress. We've been releasing this scorecard since we were founded back in 1970. So for more than 40 years, we've been releasing scorecards every year. Months ago, we began to say that this Congress, the 112th Congress, in the House of Representatives, was the most anti-environmental ever. This scorecard today proves that case. Again, without a doubt, you look at the votes, this Congress, this House is the most anti-environmental ever in history. We're going to spend a little time today. Tiernan Sittenfeld, our Senior Vice President for Government Affairs, will walk through the larger narrative. Sarah Chief, our Legislative Director, will talk about specific votes, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. Thank you all for joining us. If you want more information about the scorecard, make sure you go to www.lcv.org. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, as Jean said, my name is Tiernan Sittenfeld, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Government Affairs with the League of Conservation Voters, which works to turn environmental values into national priorities. Thank you for joining us today as we release the 2011 National Environmental Scorecard, which is available here and on the web at lcv.org. In 2011, the House Republican leadership unleashed a truly breathtaking and unprecedented assault on the environment and public health, the breadth and depth of which make the current House of Representatives the most anti-environmental in our nation's history. The 2011 National Environmental Scorecard is a sad testament to the radical nature of the House of Representatives during the first session of the 112th Congress. This scorecard includes so many votes that it literally we had to print the House vote section on 2 pages spanning both sides of the booklet for the first time ever. The 2011 scorecard includes 35 House votes, which is far more votes than have been included in any previous scorecard. But to be clear, many others warranted inclusion and would have been included in a more typical year. In fact, all told, there were more than 200 votes on the environment and public health in the House in 2011. In many cases, only final passage votes were included, even though lawmakers voted on countless amendments with enormous environmental implications. In contrast, there are just 11 Senate votes in the 2011 scorecard. So how did members do? Last year, 31 senators and 24 representatives earned a perfect score of 100%. On the other extreme, 13 senators and 4 House members earned an appalling score of 0. This is actually a smaller number than in recent years, so I think it's a pretty clear indication that those members who voted against the environment at literally every opportunity, really worked hard and went out of their way to do so. And the average House score in 2011 was 45%, which is lower than the 2010 average score of 57%. But I think an even bigger indicator of the huge change in landscape from the 111th to the 112th Congress is the dramatic drop in average lifetime scores. More specifically, the average lifetime score of members who were defeated in 2010 was 73%, which is pretty impressive as an average. Contrast that with the average lifetime score of the members who replaced them in 2011 is just 15%. So what a difference a year and what a difference a new Congress makes, this time clearly in a very bad direction. The average Senate score in 2011 was 55%, which is higher than the average Senate score of 48% in 2010. The good news coming out of 2011 is that while the House voted an unprecedented number of times against the environment and public health, the Obama administration and the U.S. Senate stood strong against the vast majority of these attacks. While the Senate was able to block many of the most damaging House-passed bills, the Obama administration also made clear its strong opposition to the House agenda, with numerous statements being clear that catering to polluters is simply not a jobs agenda, and that in fact the president would have vetoed many of these House bills had they reached his desk. Not only did the nation's bedrock environmental protections emerge largely unscathed from 2011, but the Obama administration also made major progress through administrative actions to protect public health and the environment. Among the highlights, they proposed the next round of fuel efficiency and global warming standards for cars, which is critically important for reducing our dependence on oil. They also finalized the cross-state air pollution rule and the mercury and air toxic standards to reduce power plant pollution, thus saving lives and protecting the health of millions of Americans. They also delayed and subsequently rejected the harmful Keystone XL tar sands pipeline, which would threaten our waterways and has tripled the global warming pollution of conventional oil. Of course, as I mentioned, they did end up rejecting that in early 2012. Yet, even as we stand here, our opponents are scheming about ways to roll back critical progress, both the recent progress and environmental protections that have been on the books for more than 40 years. Now, looking back on the administrative side, it's clear that not everything was perfect, and in fact, there were some disappointments, including, of course, the decision to delay the much-needed updated smog standards. But on balance, the Obama administration accomplished quite a lot for the environment in 2011, and on the whole, we were able to stop most of the very worst attacks by the House. As we stand here and as we begin 2012, it could not be clearer that we stand at a crossroads when it comes to the kind of planet we will leave for our children. LCV is grateful to the Obama administration, to our allies in the Senate and the House, and to the millions of people across the country who helped to ensure that the House leadership did not succeed in gutting our cornerstone environmental protections in 2011. We look forward to continuing to work together in 2012 and beyond to protect the planet for future generations. And now I'd like to turn it over to LCV's Legislative Director, Sarah Chifo, who will discuss the methodology of the scorecard and then run through some, but don't worry, not all, of the votes that are included in this year's scorecard, and then we'd be happy to take questions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Chifo, and as Tiernan said, I serve as the League of Conservation Voters Legislative Director. Before providing a bit more detail on the unprecedented number of votes included in this scorecard, I'd first like to review the methodology behind this document. The National Environmental Scorecard is based on a scale of 0 to 100 and is scored on the number of pro-environment votes cast divided by the total number of votes scored. Please note that an absence is counted as a negative vote. For over 40 years, the National Environmental Scorecard has been an important source of objective, factual information for the public about the most important environmental legislation considered and the corresponding voting records of all members of Congress. The 2011 National Environmental Scorecard includes 11 votes from the United States Senate and an unprecedented 35 votes from the United States House of Representatives, leaving virtually no area of the environment and public health untouched. As Tiernan noted, the 35 House votes are a subset of the unprecedented assault on the environment and public health by the Republican leadership of the House of Representatives in 2011, the single most anti-environmental chamber of Congress in our nation's history. In recognition of the constant attacks throughout the year, votes are ordered chronologically in this scorecard to tell the story of last year's onslaught. The first session of the 112th Congress got off to a particularly appalling start with H.R. 1, the House Continuing Spending Resolution Bill, which was must-pass legislation to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. Even before it reached the House floor, H.R. 1 included attacks on the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the wildlife and wild places Americans hold dear, as well as drastic funding cuts to critical environmental programs. As if that weren't bad enough, members of Congress proceeded to offer a broad array of anti-environmental amendments to H.R. 1 on the House floor. In light of what was at the time the most anti-environmental bill ever, the League of Conservation Voters took the extraordinary step of releasing a continuing resolution special edition scorecard in February. 9 of those 25 votes are included in this final 2011 scorecard. While it wasn't yet clear at the time, the scope of riders included in and voted on in H.R. 1 foreshadowed the House Republican leadership's anti-environmental playbook for the remainder of the year. Soon after H.R. 1's passage, House leadership passed legislation repealing the scientific finding by the Environmental Protection Agency that greenhouse gases endanger human health and the environment, permanently blocking the Environmental Protection Agency from reducing harmful carbon pollution under the Clean Air Act and undermining critical vehicle fuel efficiency standards. In the summer months alone, the House voted on numerous bills and amendments with major implications for our air, water, land, and wildlife. These included bills such as the 2012 House Interior and Environment Appropriations Bill, which was brought to the House floor with more than 36 anti-environmental riders, thus replacing H.R. 1 as the single worst attack on the environment and public health. Fortunately, that bill was pulled from consideration and never passed the House. Demonstrating complete amnesia about the nation's worst environmental disaster in history, the catastrophic 2010 Gulf oil spill disaster, the House passed a trio of bills that would reduce drilling oversight standards and greatly expand offshore drilling. There were target attacks on landmark environmental statutes, including the Clean Water Act, which threatened the quality and safety of the water Americans use for fishing, swimming, and drinking. There were amendments to cut much-needed funding for energy efficiency, climate change adaptation, and the Environmental Protection Agency. Additionally, the House passed legislation to expedite a decision on the Keystone XL tar sands pipeline, a truly dangerous project that would transport the dirtiest oil on the planet right through America's heartland in order to export it. As if the House had not yet done enough damage, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor released a legislative agenda for the fall in which he laid out plans to gut 10 so-called job-killing regulations, most of which were critically important to protecting public health and the environment. The House proceeded to march through the life-threatening Cantor agenda throughout the fall, passing no fewer than 9 anti-environmental bills between mid-September and early December. These included a series of bills to gut the Clean Air Act and to stop the Environmental Protection Agency from taking long overdue steps to reduce and clean up mercury and other toxic air pollution from some of the nation's biggest polluters, including power plants, cement plants, industrial boilers, and incinerators. Now, fortunately, the Senate stood in sharp contrast to the House. There are 11 Senate votes included in the 2011 National Environmental Scorecard, and they include strong rebukes to the House votes on key issues such as defending the Environmental Protection Agency's ability to issue life-saving public health protections. To start the year off, the Senate, on a bipartisan vote, rejected the radical, anti-environmental H.R. 1, the House-passed spending measure for the remainder of the 2011 fiscal year. Soon thereafter, the Senate defeated an amendment identical to the House bill, repealing the scientific finding by the EPA that greenhouse gases endanger human health and the environment, permanently blocking the EPA from reducing carbon pollution under the Clean Air Act and undermining those critical vehicle fuel efficiency standards that Tiernan touched on. Later in the year, the Senate also voted down, along strong bipartisan lines, an attempt to void the cross-state air pollution rule, which reduces dangerous smog and soot-forming pollution from power plants, pollution that is especially dangerous and harmful to residents of downwind states. The Senate also saw back-to-back votes related to our nation's dangerous dependence on oil. Unfortunately, just a minority of senators were able to block passage of legislation to end taxpayer handouts to the nation's largest and most profitable oil companies. Thankfully, the Senate rejected a measure to irresponsibly expand and expedite offshore drilling. Senate Republican leaders also forced failed votes on 2 sweeping substitute bills, one on the transportation bill and the other as an alternative to the president's jobs bill. These bills would not have jump-started our economy, but they would have gutted our landmark environmental laws, greatly expanded dirty energy sources, and undercut the government's ability to do its job, protecting the public from a wide range of threats, from pollution to unsafe workplaces. The League of Conservation Voters will be there every step of the way in 2012 and beyond to protect the environment and to hold members of Congress accountable when they put polluters ahead of the interests of their constituents. Before we open it up for questions, I want to remind everyone that the entire National Environmental Scorecard can be viewed online at www.lcv.org/scorecard. We'd now be happy to open it up for any questions you may have.